wrote a book about owls, and he's a game warden. And, all of a sudden he started seeing a lot of owls. But, during the course of our conversation, a 2-hour conversation, he was telling me, like, one night, he kind of lived off where he could leave his curtains open because nobody could see in. And there he was laying in bed, and all of a sudden he saw, like, some gray creatures walking towards his bedroom, through the driveway or the gravel road coming to his house. And next thing he knows, he's asleep. Well, then all of a sudden, he didn't even realize us two were talking, about these owls he was seeing. I said, all these owls that you're seeing everywhere you go in the forest, which, he wrote the book about owls and stuff. I go, do you ever think you saw like these grays coming towards your bedroom? Maybe you were abducted. And then every time you see these owls all of a sudden somewhere, they're not owls, they're the grays or whatever they were, aliens that implanted in your mind that when you see the aliens, you see owls. And he didn't have a word to say after that. I kind of like, I think it sunk in.
I think there's something to that, because if you look at the movie The Fourth Kind and the movie Communion, and some of the symbolism in esoteric or Gnostic or Illuminati or powers that be artwork, owls are very prominent. And what I think the owl is like, for instance, it's stealth technology. For instance, a stealth aircraft that uses technology beyond what we understand right now can actually emit a signal that makes it look like the sky. So you could have a plane or a craft flying right overhead, but it's actually, instead of emitting its signature, there's a thing in intelligence, the intelligence world, called MASINT, MASINT. It's measurements and signatures intelligence. If you're not working in the intel world, you probably never heard of it. But the point is, everything emits a measurable signature. Well, if you can manipulate your signature to emit the signature that you want, then you can make it look like whatever you want it to look like. You could make a spaceship look like a cloud. You could make an owl, an alien look like an owl. And so I believe it's part of stealth technology, so they can hide themselves in plain sight. They could stand right before you, and you would not see them or hear them. That's the scary thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking with the guy, because he's out in the forest, right? And all of a sudden there'd be a bunch of owls there, just watching them. Now, a lot of people look at owls as a pretty, bird, because they're kind of rare, at least in the cities, and stuff like that. But, that's probably what he had on his mind, and they took that, and that's why when he sees these group of owls out in the forest all of a sudden, because owls don't really hang out, from all the research I done, they don't hang out in groups. So, that it's kind of, made me think really strongly, he saw these grays coming towards his bedroom, and then all of a sudden, right afterwards, he sees a lot of owls off and on. Hey, I think that's what's in.
There's an interesting characteristic about owls that maybe we ought to ponder, and that your audience ought to think about, is that over the years, the owl, I think, has evolved. You know how an owl can turn its head like almost 360 degrees, like in all directions, or, all the way to the right or all the way to the left. It does that because its eyeballs do not move in the sockets. And that's why it has to turn its head the way it does. And sometimes I wonder if the owl is used as a symbol because of that characteristic, something about the fixed eye, but having to use the body to look 360 degrees. I don't think symbolism, because they could use a giraffe, or they could use an elephant, or they could use a monkey, but an owl is used. And I think that characteristic, I think it's the only bird where its eyeballs do not move in the socket, and so it has evolved to have to use its head to turn to see around it. So That's just something to think about.
Well,
Why is the owl?
I also think about when I was in grade school, the stories the teachers used to read, like in first, second grade, like the old wise owl and all that stuff, and, like they're supposedly be watching and are very intelligent and stuff like that. I don't know. I just find it kind of weird. Hey, we're down almost with our time almost gone. Did you have one more story you can give off in about like 5 minutes?
I do. Yeah. My other DVD, well, on Amazon Prime, if you go on there right now and you look up True Stories, A Lifetime of Alien Abductions, I grew up playing baseball, and I have a coach and mentor who has been like a father figure to me my entire life. He's trustworthy. He's a member of the community. He works in the government sector. So he's a very private, professional, good, trustworthy person. Since he's been a child, he and his family have been experiencing missing time and probable abductions and sightings. And it started for him when he was a child. He remembers a time when he was probably 5 or 6 years old where he was out at a field, and then he remembers flying. And then he remembers being dropped off by some imaginary friends from some type of a craft, and then walking back towards his house in eyesight while his family watched, and his uncle, who was very disturbed by the whole thing and wouldn't talk to him about it. But his family saw him abducted and dropped off. And then he, over his lifetime now, and he's almost 70. I think he's 67. He has been having a lifetime of missing time and alien abductions, and I believe him. And one time specifically, he was driving from Central Florida around the Orlando area toward Cape Canaveral, and it was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he had been working out there, and he was on his way back to the East Coast, and he had stopped to get some food, and he was eating in the truck on his way home, and around 1 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly, it was about 7. Yeah.
No, I didn't say anything. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. And suddenly, it was about 7:30 in the morning, and he was driving into work with no shirt on, the shirt in his back seat, food not finished in his back seat, and he didn't know how he got to work or why he was there. And they told him, "Why are you here so early?" And he's like, I don't know. I'm just going to go home and take a shower." He had no idea how he got there, and that's happened to him a couple of times. Now, he said he kind of changed his life about 10 years ago, and from what he knows, the abduction stopped. But his testimony is so moving in the interview I did with him that...
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. I keep hearing interference. I think somebody's probably eavesdropping on us. You never know.
Oh,
but his testimony is so... Some of the things that happened to him were so moving that he can't even bring himself to talk about it. And so, something is going on. And I believe, you have Dr. Greer out there with with Project Disclosure. I mean, if he's got the info, he needs to put it out, because we really need to get to the bottom of this. Or, who knows, it might be so disturbing it's going to shake mankind to its knees. I don't know. I just think it's so much more going on, with UFOs, aliens, and abductions than, they're even beginning to let us know. I think, too, if you get people who have been abducted, or trying to spread the word about it, it seems like they get discredited one way or another. Steve Bassett's going to be on my show here the first part of the week. And, he had done so much lobbying with the Congress and all that stuff, trying to get him to, disclose, not just UFOs and aliens, but a whole bunch of different things. And he really feels that maybe in a year or so, we're going to be told a lot. I don't know. I've been hearing that, though, for years. I've been in broadcasting since 76. A friend of mine, Art Bell, kept saying, we're going to hear about it here, in the next year or two. Well, how many years ago that was? I remember that from about 1990 going on. I don't know. And, I will say this here before we get off. I told you before, one of my dad's friends from Korea was James Gardner, the actor.
And, I didn't know that when I was a little kid, when he'd come up every summer and come and visit my dad and, and all that stuff. And then one day I realized who he was, and then we started talking, and he was a cool guy. And, I said, boy, do you know Ronald Reagan? Because I was infatuated with Ronald Reagan. He goes, yeah, he's a friend of mine. And he goes, hey, Ronald Reagan does a show monthly, once a month, for young people can call up and ask the president questions. And he goes, let me see what I can do, And then, a few weeks later, I get a phone call from the White House. And here's Ronald Reagan. I talked to him on national radio for maybe about 5 minutes, and we just talked. And he, I asked him some questions and he answered them. But then about a week later, I get a phone call from the White House. And guess who it was? Ronald Reagan. And he called me several times, and I even called him once or twice. But the whole thing is, one time I asked him a little bit about Star Wars, because he always made jokes about Russia. Like one time he got on the news and he thought, the microphone wasn't on, and he goes, well, we should nuke Russia. And, and it went over all the news media, broadcasted it. And I asked him about Star Wars, and, he kind of really didn't want to say too much about it, other than he said it's, from out there. He used that word once or twice, out there, not earthwise, but out there. And, I was young, and I kind of, didn't place that in my head. But then, when I got older, when I kept thinking of that conversation, I think the whole thing with Star Wars wasn't so much to protect our Earth from Russia or, China or some other country. I think it was more to protect our Earth from something else out there.
Yeah. I agree with you. By the way, I liked your Reagan impersonation. It was pretty good.
I wasn't even trying to do one,
I know, and it just came out. I know. It's
well, Nancy. But anyway, he was a cool guy, and it opened my eyes up, talking to him those few times, because he was very open, and boy, we need a president like that.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that Trump will, if he can, disclose some information to us. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to believe whenever something is disclosed, but I don't know if I could even handle the truth sometimes when I think about it, because the more I think about it, the more disturbing it might be. And sometimes maybe it's better that we don't know everything, but still, I mean, I'm tired of going through life with all these questions. I really just wish we could just find out the truth.
Well, you know what? Society could break down if they came out and said that we've been, invaded, or, certain things are going on. It could cause the collapse of society as we know it, because, I mean, everything we grew up, everything that we believe and hold, could be destroyed in a matter of minutes.
Well, you mentioned War of the Worlds before. Remember when Orson Welles put out that radio show back in, I guess, the 20s or 30s, it wound up in, like, suicides, because people were freaking out because they really believed we were being invaded by aliens, and it wound up turning, causing a panic, major panic.
But you know what? If that happened today, that he would have been put in prison, because, there was people that killed themselves. Not just that, there was a case of a farmer, right? He killed his whole family and himself because, you know what? He was so scared that the aliens would, it'd be so much more painful for his whole family, to encounter the aliens and go through that. So he took his gun out and shot them all. I mean,
that happened in the movie The Fourth Kind, which is based on actual events. They show the side-by-side video with the characters playing it and what really happened. And this guy was so disturbed over being abducted and invaded by these beings that were doing whatever they were doing to him, that he was so distraught that the only way he thought he could handle it was he killed his family, and then he killed himself right in front of the police, because he didn't want to let that happen to them anymore. So, just think the truth might be so disturbing that it causes something like that to happen. I wouldn't want to be the one to pass that information on to the world if it was going to be that disturbing. and maybe the truth is being hidden